Let's talk about Nosferatu. It's a big hit horror movie, a remake of an old silent movie. It was made in 1922 by the director F.W. Murnau in Germany with the famous German actor Max Schreck playing a guy named Count Orlok, but he was essentially Dracula, and most of the story with modifications was stolen from Bram Stoker's novel Dracula. Stoker's widow sued over copyright violation, and a court ruled that every copy of the film, a classic film, it's a beautiful silent film, every copy was supposed to be destroyed, but a couple of prints survived, and so we still have it, and it's been, reprinted and everything else like that. It's just beautiful. So it's remade by Robert Eggers, and kind of reimagined with Bill Skarsgård as Count Orlok. I'm going to call these guys Dracula and use the names from Dracula because I can't remember the names. Nicholas Hoult is in it, and Lily Rose Depp plays who would be Minna Harker from Dracula. She's the heroine. And Eggers, you probably know, he made The Witch, which I really liked, a really, really interesting film using mostly dialogue from the Puritan era, kind of one of a raft of very intelligent horror movies that include things like It Follows and The Babadook that were really interesting, and this was one of them. He made The Lighthouse, which was beautiful to look at, but I found it unbearably pretentious and boring. I felt like I was trapped on the lighthouse with those guys. Beautifully filmed, beautifully acted, but just really pretentious. And pretentious, somebody once said nothing dates like modernism. And I think that that's one of the problems with those films. They get big critical raves, but people don't want to watch them again because they're just excruciating. The Northman, which I don't even remember, that was kind of the Hamlet story reimagined from its original legendary source. And I remember liking it, but feeling it was flawed. It didn't do too well. But this film is a big hit. It is spectacularly beautiful. It's the most beautiful film I have seen in years. In fact, I cannot think of the last time I sat there and watched every frame, just choking at the how beautiful it was. And the first 2/3 of the picture I liked, gorgeous beyond belief. Every frame, it's just a joy to look at it. It has things I don't like, some boo scares. He thinks that's part of Eggers thinks that's part of the tradition of horror. I could do without him. And the Orlok, the Dracula character, is a little too much modeled on the Coppola version with Gary Oldman, which I didn't like at all, but Eggers did like it. But where this beauty comes from is from the original, which was an expression of what's called German Expressionism. But German Expressionism is really a modernization of German romantic art. And German romantic art is an expression of Gothic storytelling. So Dracula and all of this German Expressionism and Gothic art and all this, you can see it in the old Universal pictures of Frankenstein, because a lot of those directors came over from Germany. Dracula, those had this kind of same look, but Eggers does it at a much, much bigger level. It's just absolutely beautiful. But the Gothic storytelling is an 18th century Romantic era development, and it's named after the Gothic architecture of the high Middle Ages, let's say. So a lot of the stories would take place in Gothic castles and Gothic churches and all this stuff. And my theory, which I've written about a long time ago, is that, the 18th century was an age of revolution. And it was the age when faith started to fall away and science started to rise, and all the forms were killed, the priests were killed in the French Revolution, and people started to break away from the church and all this. And Gothic fiction was both a turn back, a kind of nostalgic wish to restore the wholeness of Catholic belief. At the same time, it was suspicious of the wholeness of Catholic belief because the castles are crumbling and they're scary, and a lot of the villains are monks and evil priests and things like that. And a lot of times the Catholics show up as the evil. So the German Expressionism, Gothic art, is an expression of a nostalgia for faith, but also a fear of faith. And that is where Egger is as a storyteller. I don't know anything about his personal life or his personal beliefs, but that's his problem as a storyteller. If you look at The Witch, the religion is all closed-minded and censorious and oppressive, but without it, there's evil. So he believes in evil, but I remember I did a show on horror before where I said horror now is about evil, but it has no good in it, so the stories don't make sense. 2/3 through this movie, which I was just enjoying immensely, I suddenly realized it was about to go off the rails. I realized it was going, the ending was, he was not going to stick the landing, as we say. He was not going to make the ending work. And The reason I knew this was because of the absence of God, not in terms of Egger's faith, that's none of my business and it's nobody's business, but in terms of the characters and where God would have been and faith would have been in those characters' life. It takes place in the 19th century in Germany, and where God would have been in those lives. Now, Eggers did a really smart thing. He put the Minna character, the Depp character, at the center of the story. And it begins with her crying out as a young girl, a virginal girl, crying out essentially to be to death by this Count Orlok. She doesn't know who he is. She thinks he's some kind of angel, but she's crying out for this. But even her yearning for this angelic figure is also a yearning for this violent sexuality. So the dark side of female sexuality is inside her, and Eggers talked about this in an interview. This is cut 11.
She has a deep understanding, an innate understanding of something she doesn't have language for, and no one else can relate to it. Her husband, who loves her, is dismissive of her. She's misdiagnosed as hysteric and melancholic and all these things, and you literally see her physically grappling with all this stuff. And the one person who is able to share in this understanding of the dark side of the world is unfortunately this demon lover, this vampire who's not a nice person.
So in other words, the evil spirit, the demon lover, is the only one who can understand her yearning for the demon lover. Unfortunately, he is the demon lover. That's a very insightful, I think, take on what's happening in the story. And because she's a woman in the 19th century, living in rationalist times. Remember, the 19th century was a very scientific, rationalist time. No one believes her except Willem Dafoe, who plays the Van Helsing character. He plays the odd doctor. And listen carefully to what Dafoe says to all the unbelieving men around this suffering woman who senses this vampire is coming. This is what Dafoe says, cut 9.
I have seen things in this world that would have made Isaac Newton crawl back into his mother's womb. We have not become so much enlightened as we have been blinded by the gaseous light of science. I have wrestled with the devil as Jacob wrestled the angel in Peniel, and I tell you, if we are to tame darkness, we must first face that it exists. Meine Herren, we are here encountering the undead plague carrier, the vampire. Nosferatu.
So a great speech, absolutely where we are as a society. It's not so much that we don't believe, it's that we can no longer see. Science has elevated reason above its station. Reason is a wonderful tool. Reason helps us understand the material world, but it doesn't show us the world whole. It doesn't show us what I was talking about before, that knowledge that we have. What is a woman? We can't say it out loud, but we know what it is. We know what it's supposed to be. We know what a man is supposed to be. It doesn't have to be John Wayne. It doesn't have to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. We simply know that a certain amount of character and courage and integrity goes into being a man. A certain amount of tenderness, generosity, and sacrifice goes into being a woman. Those words don't really describe it, but we understand it inside, just like we understand the difference between good and evil until, because we have no words for it, we allow ourselves to be talked out of it. We can't see anymore because we are all operating on one side of our brain, the left side, I believe, of our brain, the rational side of our brain, but we've lost the whole image of humanity. And that's what he's talking about there. And it's brilliant. So I used to lay awake at night, just really uncomfortable, tossing, turning. Now I lay awake in complete comfort because I have Helix Sleep. It's a total game changer. I'm still not going to sleep. It's just not my way, but at least I feel great all night. The thing I love about my Helix mattress is how well it does with temperature regulation, which really eases some of those annoying middle of the night wake-ups, sweating terribly. I don't even want to talk about it. Plus, it's easy to connect to other wearable devices so you can actually see the data to back up your sleep improvements. sense. What makes Helix different is they don't just sell you a random mattress. They actually match you with the perfect one for your body and sleep style. Whether you're a side sleeper, back sleeper, or somewhere in between, they've got you covered, or just a lie-awake person. They've got you covered too. Trust me, when you find the right match, you'll wonder how you ever slept or stayed awake on anything else. Right now is actually the perfect time to upgrade your sleep because Helix is offering an incredible deal. Go to helixsleep.com/Klavan to get 27% off site-wide plus 2 free dream pillows with any mattress purchase. That's helixsleep.com/Klavan for 27% off site-wide plus 2 free dream pillows with any mattress purchase. helixsleep.com/Klavan. Wait, Klavan? How do you spell Klavan?
K-L-A-V-A-N, there are no E's in Klavan.
Now, Eggers prides himself on not imposing modern ideas on stories from the past. In other words, feminism. He's very, very well aware that he's operating in a place where the feminists will rip him to pieces and have ripped him to pieces a little bit in this movie for anything that doesn't fit their modern view of what a woman should be like and would have been like. You have to rewrite everything to fulfill the modern feminist view. And he knows this. He was in an interview where the interviewer said to him, between The Lighthouse and The Witch, you're clearly drawn to the dark, the creepy, the old, the unsettling. What about ancient legends gets under your skin? And this is what Eggers says. He says, this sounds super uber precious, but I think it's hard to do this kind of creative work in a modern secular society because it becomes all about your ego and yourself. And I'm envious. I'm envious of medieval craftsmen who are doing the work for God. And that becomes a way you get to be creative to celebrate something else. And also you're censoring yourself because it's not about like me, 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 me. So you say, oh, I got to rein that back because that's not what this altarpiece needs to be, right? If you're an artist, any worldview where everything around them is full of meaning is exciting to me because we live in such a tiresome, lame, commercial culture now. What he wants to write is he wants to write about this woman's belief in God because that's the only way the end of the movie makes sense. I won't give it away, but the end of the movie does not make sense unless this woman, who would have been probably a Lutheran Christian in this German play, she's obviously fighting Orlok, the vampire, because of her faith. And I'm not saying that Eggers needs to believe, and I'm not saying that God needs to win. I'm not saying that, we have to see that God is triumphant and everything is great. Not at all. It simply has to make sense. Stories have to make sense, and the story doesn't make sense without her believing in God. I'm talking about storytelling and why so many stories are so flat and so bad, and this one the ending just goes off the rail entirely. And suddenly Willem Dafoe's character makes no sense. He's dancing around like a crazy man for no reason. Suddenly we don't know why anybody's doing anything. It's flat. It's emotionally flat. What should have been an incredibly inspiring and horrifying last moment is not particularly. It's just emotionally flat. After this beautiful, beautiful film, it goes awry, not because Eggers doesn't believe in God, but because he wouldn't let his character believe in God. God has been, by cultural fiat, removed from the picture. And that is the problem we have right now. That is true for all of us. When we embrace Andrew Tate, when we call for mothers to be sent into battle, when we denigrate the female and male natures we're all born with and all born to love and embrace and all born to bring together into one flesh, when we do all those things, we've allowed ourselves to be reasoned away from the truth, to be reasoned out of the things we inherently know. And you might say, well, yes, but some of the things we inherently know are wrong. Like we might think it's right to keep slaves, or we might think it's right to be a bigot. Yes, but the very fact that you can get things wrong means you can get them right. And reason is not always the guide to do it. That is why all of the rules that the Pharisees throw at Jesus, he throws back with the simple knowledge of good and evil. And that is why when you have people, these Jew haters yelling, oh, Christ is king, they know nothing of Christ because all they know is the rules that make them feel strong when they should really feel sinful and humbled. I'm not preaching to you. I'm talking about things making sense. I'm talking about how even a talented and self-searching artist like Eggers, and I love him, I hope to see more from him. I thought this picture, I was glad I went to see it. It was, like I said, it was an hour and 40 minutes of some of the most beautiful filmmaking I've ever seen. But he can't see what his subject is, even if he wants to reject it. Even if he wants to reject it, if you want to say you don't believe in God, you have to know who God is. But God has been silenced in our culture, and with that silence, The rest of us have no pathway to the truth. And that's the situation we are as this new day begins, this new administration begins, and I hope a new era for America begins. And I love that guy. If you want more of him, like and subscribe. And if you want even more of him, subscribe to The Andrew Klavan Show, wherever you get your podcasts.